On August 2, 1858, a century-old corporate monopoly was completely shattered, and a new empire took its place. Before that date, the British East India Company operated as a private commercial entity, yet it held the sweeping power to administer the entire Indian subcontinent. The Government of India Act 1858 was a desperate administrative restructure forced by catastrophic systemic failures. To understand the foundation of the modern Indian administrative state, we have to look closely at the mechanics of this specific legislation. A second parallel document arrived 3 months later, Queen Victoria's Proclamation of November 1, 1858. The act provided the structural mechanism for the transfer of power. The proclamation provided the ideological pacification required to make that new power stick. We are going to analyze the final results of these two documents, tracing their specific clauses backward to the historical crises that made them necessary. The British Crown's swift intervention in 1858 operated purely as an exercise in ultimate imperial damage control. Look at this map of British India. The primary catalyst for this shift began in 1857, as a massive revolt swept across the northern and central territories. The First War of Indian Independence delivered a massive shock to the system. It exposed the inability of the East India Company to maintain order. The rebellion laid bare a harsh reality. The company's policies were widely seen as oppressive and exploitative, rendering their continued rule unsustainable. Back in London, the British Parliament faced the fact that a private corporation could no longer hold a territory of such immense scale and volatility. Prime Minister Lord Palmerston was the first political architect to act on this, drafting legislation to strip the company of its authority. However, Palmerston resigned before the bill could pass, briefly stalling the legislative push. The initiative was picked up by Edward Stanley, who revised the draft and successfully pushed the finalized legislation through Parliament. This finalized bill was formally titled An Act for the Better Governance of India. The rebellion of 1857 forced Parliament to concede that corporate profit motives were incompatible with the long-term security of the British Empire. Let's examine the structural mechanics of how this Act for the Better Governance of India actually operated. This organizational chart illustrates the core mechanism, the complete transfer of authority from the East India Company directly to the British Crown. This abolished dual rule, dissolving the Board of Control and Court of Directors, establishing direct sovereign control over India. This centralization was designed to maximize efficiency. It removed the inherent friction between corporate shareholders seeking dividends and state military interests seeking stability. Through this structural shift, India transitioned from a corporate holding into a formal state-managed colony. The 1858 Act operated as a structural amputation. It surgically removed the East India Company to build a centralized, security-first imperial bureaucracy. With the Bureaucratic Act in place, we turn to its public-facing counterpart, Queen Victoria's Proclamation, issued on November 1, 1858. The proclamation was a calculated tool of political stabilization in a palatable way. We can break it down into specific clauses. First, the Crown promised to respect the rights of Indian princes, officially abolishing the doctrine of lapse. The doctrine of lapse had been an aggressive annexation tactic used by the company to swallow up princely states. Abolishing it was vital for securing the future loyalty of local rulers. Second, the proclamation included an explicit promise to avoid any interference in the religious beliefs and customs of the population. This was a direct response to 1857. Widespread fears of forced religious conversion under company rule had provided the spark for the massive uprising. Third, the document promised to grant Indian subjects equal rights and protections under British law. The strategic intent here was clear. Granting theoretical equal rights was meant to pacify the general public and foster a loyal, educated Indian administrative class to help run the empire. Queen Victoria's proclamation utilized calculated concessions to stabilize the region, ensuring the conditions that caused the 1857 rebellion would not materialize again. On the ground in India, the rollout was immediate. As the proclamation was read to the public at grand assemblies, the new reality of Crown rule took effect. We can map these differences onto a comparative matrix, weighing the pre-1858 Company administration directly against the post-1858 Crown rule. Looking at primary policy directives, the company operated on an agenda of aggressive territorial expansion. The Crown replaced this with an agenda of pacification and maintaining the status quo with princely states. Looking at the chain of command, The convoluted, profit-driven corporate monopoly was replaced by the streamlined, direct sovereign control of the British Parliament. The administrative framework was overhauled to provide stability, but the underlying reality of the system, wealth extraction and colonial subservience, remained entirely intact. Despite the proclamation's promises of equality, strict systemic hierarchies persisted, setting the stage for a century of Indian political struggle. The legislative actions of 1858 laid down the structural and ideological foundation of the British Raj, building the apparatus that would govern the subcontinent until 1947.